Good morning from Winnipeg and good evening in Bangladesh. Ladies and gentlemen, dear audience, welcome to our webinar titled Rohingya Crisis, Who's Winning? Before we dive into our discussion, I'd like to outline how today's session will unfold and acknowledge the land on which we gather digitally or physically. We also recognize that many of us are joining from Manitoba, which is located on the original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples and on the homelands of Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories and acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. The audience, our webinar will be divided into three segments, each dedicated to one of the critical questions we aim to explore. After I introduce each question, our panelists will provide their insights, following by a brief discussion among them to delve deeper into the topic. We encourage our audience to participate by submitting questions from their social media channels. There will be a dedicated Q&A session after our discussions where we'll address as many audience questions as time allows. The audience, today we gather amidst a rapidly evolving situation in Myanmar, which has been significant developments since October 2023. The sweeping successes of ethnic armed organizations in collaborations with the People's Defense Forces has altered the Myanmar's landscape, capturing many areas and pushing the region towards what many are calling a war-like condition. Since gaining independence from British colonial rule in 1948, Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, has been embroiled in one of the world's longest-running civil conflicts. The root of this conflict lies in the struggle for autonomy and rights among the country's diverse ethnic groups. Myanmar is home to over 135 official ethnic groups, which major ones including the Kachin, Karen, Shan, Rohingya, Chin, Mon, and Rakhine, among others. Many of these groups have sought greater autonomy, recognition, and protection of their rights in a state dominated by Bamar majority. Many ethnic regions are rich in resources yet remain underdeveloped, with their populations facing poverty, displacement, and violence. The grievances of these ethnic minorities stem from a combination of historical, political, and socio-economic factors. Post-independence, the central government sought to consolidate power and impose a national identity, often at the expense of the right and identities of ethnic minorities. The audience, now about Bangladesh's response to Rohingya crisis that occurs within a complex regional and international landscape. The influx of refugees since the military crackdown in Myanmar's Rakhine state in August 27 has placed immense strain on Bangladesh's resources and infrastructure. The situation is further complicated by the ongoing conflict within Myanmar, where the military's action against ethnic armed organizations and civilians have led to increased instability and displacement. Bangladesh faces the challenges of balancing its domestic priorities with the humanitarian imperatives of hosting a large refugee population. The situation is exacerbated by COVID-19 pandemic, environmental vulnerabilities, and the risk of radicalization within camps. Moreover, the repatriation process has been stalled due to concerns over safety and citizenship rights for returning Rohingyas. The international community's response has been mixed, with significant humanitarian aid but limited success in resolving the underlying political issues that drive the crisis. The audience, the future of the Rohingya in Bangladesh and the broader region requires a coordinated international response that addresses the root causes of displacement in Myanmar. Bangladesh's efforts to navigate the situation will need to remain adaptive and resilient, seeking innovative solutions to humanitarian, security, and diplomatic challenges. The ultimate goal remains the safe, voluntary, and dignified return of Rohingya refugees to their homes in Myanmar, within a framework that ensures their rights and security. This long-term resolution will likely hinge on significant political changes within Myanmar, regional cooperation, and sustained international pressure on Myanmar military government to engage in meaningful reforms. Today, we are here to delve into the complexities of this crisis with a particular focus on some critical questions that challenges the future of Myanmar and the Rohingya community. The questions we are going to ponder over today are the rise of success of Arakan army in Arakan and the security situation in border areas. And the second question that we are going to also discuss is rapid changes in security situation by ethnic armed organizations and People's Defense Force throughout Myanmar, and whether this has the potential of fragmentation of the Union of Myanmar. And finally, Rohingya repatriation potential in light of the current situation. As we understand, the repatriation process is totally stalled over the past couple of months. Dear audience, at this time, it is my privilege to introduce our esteemed panelists. Firstly and importantly, Professor Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed, and who has led and founded Center for Genocide Studies in Bangladesh, and he's from Department of International Relations, a renowned scholar, and he also has a Canadian connections because he has received his PhD from Carleton University back in the days. So welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
And then we have another very esteemed scholar, Dr. Niloy Ranjan Biswas. He is a professor at the Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka. He has undertaken his studies at the University of Dhaka, Bangladesh, the George Washington University, Washington, D.C., and the City University of London. And he has published extensively and research on Rohingya crisis and extremism and radicalization to violence. So welcome, Dr. Niloy, to the show.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And finally, we are waiting to be joined by Lieutenant General retired Mahfuzur Rahman, who is little away due to personal circumstances, but we are expecting him to join shortly. So with this introduction, the dear audience, let us quickly delve into the first part of the discussion. And the audience, please join us in the question and answer session. You can write directly into your social media feed, and we'll take the questions from there. So without further ado, let me welcome first Professor Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed for his opening remarks. Sir, floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. If you can remind me the first question, that would be great.
Not a problem. So we are talking about rise of Arakan army and in general the ethnic armed organization and their rapid success. What has really caused it, sir? And do you see the alliances of other parties here making them so successful since October?
Thank you. Thank you, Kausar. And thank you very much for that introduction. A couple of things I think we need to keep in mind when we talk about Myanmar, Arakan army, and of course the current crisis that also includes Bangladesh and the region. The first thing that we need to point out that Myanmar is not a typical modern state, not a typical Westphalian state as we understand, where sovereignty lies at the center. That is not what Myanmar is all about. In Myanmar, the state gets reproduced with fragmented sovereignty, if I can use that word. There are altogether 135 ethnic communities, but 8 or 10 communities or 8 or 10 ethnic groups almost have a proto-state status. They have their own army. They also participate in revenue collection, in some of the developmental work, and of course, they reproduce themselves by having an interesting relationship with the central government. So it's not a typical modern state as such. It's a fragmented with a fragmented state or fragmented sovereignty, and that allows lot of when we come to analyze, it allows different ideas to come in, different ways of resolving the issues, and all the complexities that we see now in Myanmar. So that's the first thing. Now, what has happened this time? In a big way, the majority Burma community got divided. the divisions are always there, but this time the Burma community got divided between, of course, Aung San Suu Kyi's party, if you can use that word, the National Unity Government (NUG), and the Tatmadaw, or the Myanmar military. Now, earlier, also something of this kind happened, and as you know, Aung San Suu Kyi was interned for many years. But that time, Aung San Suu Kyi decided on a non-violent path. And the reason why she also got the Nobel Peace Prize. But this time, the situation is different. NUG opted for a militant wing, and the militant wing is called PDF, People's Democratic Force. So NUG PDF versus Tatmadaw, or Myanmar military, in majority community. This is a totally different equation. Now, this equation became all the more problematic because NUG PDF is openly supported by the Western countries, particularly the United States. And United States already has one act named called Burma Act. And in Burma Act, it is clearly mentioned, a couple of things are clearly mentioned. One is support for the democratic aspiration of Myanmaris, which clearly tells you the, support for NUG PDF. It also talks about minorities getting suppressed. In other ways, they also the act actually extend its hand towards the ethnic armed organizations. And in that connection, it also mentions about Rohingya and the genocide that was committed against Rohingya. That is also mentioned. Now, when NUG, as you know, Aung San Suu Kyi, after all, has quite a support, and when they started engaging in the militant, in a what you call a coercive conflict or militant conflict, you can see that they were gaining areas after areas, but at the same time, the ethnic armed organizations, which had interest in relationship with the central government, also took an opportunity to increase its power in their respective localities. So, whether the Shan army, the Kachin army, the Wa state army, including the Arakan army, all actually started taking, the opportunity to strengthen their position in Myanmar. And there are some reports which tells that there's a China hand also in helping the ethnic armed organizations to gain greater areas or deepen their position in Myanmar. And I guess the Chinese strategy probably will be that whoever comes to power ultimately in the majority community, whether it's the current Myanmar military, the current Tatmadaw, or NUG, China will have a say, because the ethnic armed organizations, NUG, PDF, or Tatmadaw, they have to bargain with all the ethnic organizations, and from that point of view, China will maintain its position in Myanmar. Now, that's quite a interesting strategy, and it's not unique. Anyone reading a little bit of Sun Tzu or Clausewitz or Chanakya will know that any country will do. Now, with this ethnic armed organization, what has happened? They are also forming alliance, and one very important alliance that was formed is a Three Brotherhood Alliance. And in that Three Brotherhood Alliance, we also have Arakan Army, and they made quite a gain in the Shan state, literally. And later there was a compromise, and there was some negotiation again with China's support, and it is managed. The ground is quite clear that in the Shan state, the ethnic armed organization, the Three Brotherhood Alliance, has much greater power than they had earlier. Now, Arakan Army was also involved there, and so Arakan Army thought, why not? Now that Shan state, they have a bigger say. why not have that also in the Arakan, where Arakan army has been historically very active. So they started also making quite, I think the depth is quite high now, as we hear in Arakan, and the battle is quite fierce. And out of that battle, we find some paramilitary force and police members of the central government taking shelter in Bangladesh. Now, two things very quickly we need to keep in mind here. One, this is not an exception. For Bangladesh, it is the first time, but the same thing happened in November last year, November, December last year, where around 636, and those were from the military who crossed over to Indian border. But India very quickly repatriated them back to Myanmar. They did not let the issue continue, because they knew Northeast, as you know, itself is a problematic area. So they thought, let us resolve the issue very quickly. The second thing that on this we need to keep in mind, that none of these ethnic armed organizations are fighting for a separate state. None of them, historically. They're all fighting for greater autonomy. This is the uniqueness, or this is the difference from other conflicts that we see in some other places in the world. So Arakan army is not fighting for an independent Arakan, nor is Shan state army fighting for independent Shan. So at the end of the day, all of them will bargain with Tatmadaw. And the idea is to have a loose federal state structure, which currently the NUG, which is not in power, is promising that idea that we'll have a loose federal structure. But, when you are outside the power, you make lots of promises. But the moment you are in power, because you are part of the majority community, at that time, will the monks agree to that? Will the majority community agree to that? Those are, because they're the majority in any way. But still, the idea is to have a greater autonomy and not to have an independent state. So when it comes to Bangladesh, and I'll just take 2 minutes and I'll stop to listen to Niloy also. Since they have, crossed the border and come to Bangladesh, my point has been from day one, or first hour, when I was approached by media and all, that they should go back. Bangladesh should make an effort for an immediate repatriation. We should not get involved in the internal affairs of Myanmar. This we have been very particular. Bangladesh really doesn't, we don't encourage any external actor making any intervention in our internal affairs. And this became very clear during the election. You have seen the government has been very firm on that. So the same country cannot just, because it got an opportunity, cannot just meddle in the internal conflicts of another country. Now, I would end by saying that this provides an opportunity, because Sun Tzu and later Einstein, they say that every crisis offers an opportunity. There is a big opportunity for India, China, Bangladesh, and Myanmar to work together. Why I say this? Because, as you know, India's northeast is a problematic area. And we have seen that when the Rohingyas, when the Myanmar paramilitary force and police got into Bangladesh, within hours, the National Security Advisor of India came to Bangladesh, had a very quick meeting with our Prime Minister, very direct meeting. And at the same time, when our new Foreign Minister went to Delhi, they discussed Rohingya. The agenda was there. Earlier in the agenda, Rohingya was not there. This gives you, very quickly one can understand that India also is worried about the development. And so is China. Why? because it's an open secret that NUG PDF is backed by the United States. Now, you know, India will never want United States to get into Myanmar militarily, because we have seen how South Asia got into serious trouble with the Afghanistan case, and we have seen how Pakistan suffered, still suffering actually, because they were the ones who allowed United States to meddle in Afghanistan 20 years back, if you remember. So from that experience, I think India is very careful, and not to mention, it's almost a similar situation when it comes to Afghanistan and Myanmar, and Northeast also a little bit, because Northeast, there are a lot of insurgency groups. Just few months back, Manipur was in a terrible situation. Over 300 Manipuri citizens died. So from that point of view, India definitely will not want United States to come as Burma Act allows it to come. You see, Burma Act makes it very clear that if the US president thinks, then he could actually support the ethnic armed organizations and NUG with logistics and all. Uh, Now, when you have something of that kind, arms will flow to that part. And when arms starts flowing, it will not remain limited within Myanmar. If there is a demand somewhere around, the supply will be there. So the reason I point out that every crisis offers an opportunity, this is an opportunity because India will not, entertain the idea of the United States meddling that much in Myanmar, and so will China will not. So there is a possibility of China and India working together and use BSIM, Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar. There is a small structure there. There were some meetings. It never floated, but this provides an opportunity. Now, keep in mind, a lot of people will say, how can India, China work together? India and China have been working together on several platforms. BRICS is one big one. They have been working together on Russia and Ukraine conflict. You have seen they were together. And more importantly, on the Rohingya and Myanmar issue, they have been working together because in the United Nations, all the voting that took place on the Rohingya, both China and India, made the same decision. They abstained. So this provides a golden opportunity for BCIM to get floated and make a headway, because if it gets more complicated, and something like Afghanistan, if the situation really deteriorates, then China definitely will be worried, but more importantly, India will also be worried given the situation in Northeast. So I will end by saying that I see this crisis also as an opportunity. And if BCIM can work, both China and India can actually put pressure on Myanmar on the issue of the Rohingya. So sending the 330 paramilitary or police back quickly would also give a positive, kind of image about Bangladesh to the Myanmari people, to the general people also. And at the same time, if China and India, if they can put pressure on Myanmar, I believe we can start working on the Rohingya issue. I'll stop there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for traversing such a tragic. I mean, this is really important for audience to understand from where the surge of, I think, organizations have actually flourished, and to what end it might be resolved peacefully. And especially, I think the audience mark the words of Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed as he mentioned Americans, possible intervention through the Burma Act, which makes it very explicit, I believe, in terms of potential involvement. But that remains to be seen, because we don't expect this to happen rapidly, because America is heading towards election this year, at the end of this year. So with this bit of discussions, let me welcome Dr. Niloy Biswas. And our question, or rather request to him, would be that, sir, if you kindly focus on the development, as Dr. Imtiaz mentioned, and what's its impact on Bangladesh, and with particular focus on Rohingya community and its repatriation. Go ahead, sir. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure indeed, and particularly to share this floor with my teacher, Professor Imtiaz Ahmed. And as always, I've learned a lot, particularly regarding the history which unfortunately was not very familiar to us when we were talking about our own neighborhood studies and Bangladesh Myanmar relations as well. Just 2 points before I'd like to add with what Professor Imtiaz Ahmed has just mentioned, and it's absolutely that Myanmar is not a modern state or typical modern state regarding the concentration and sovereignty and so on and so forth. At the same time, Myanmar over the years has turned into a post-colonial garrison state. That's also very important, and particularly when we think of we can understand the idea of garrison state has been evolved in West, and sometimes USA has been used as an example, quite significantly in the primary literatures of this idea. Later on in South Asian context, many scholars have also identified Pakistan as a case, but Myanmar is also a very interesting garrison state because particularly after 1960s till 1982 when the Citizenship Act was enacted and through which the 100 plus ethnic groups were brought under the eight broad classic, eight broader ethnic groups, which in fact says that the creation of ethnic groups has been so much politically constructed in Myanmar, and at the same time, has created divisions, and the military has actually continued the divide and rule policies in a very new, creative and different formats, and utilized violence, in fact, to suppress the minorities and created stateless people. Rohingyas were one of them that we all know. So this is also very important for us to understand that since 60s onwards, the development that has happened in the Myanmar state has eventually led us to this situation. That's very important. The second point was the political economy of conflict. I think this is very important all over the world, wherever on, whether it is Africa, whether it is Southeast Asia, and particularly when we talk about Myanmar, I think one of the reasons why the armed groups, unlike in many other places, are more important not to create a separate state, rather to get the share of the resource heavy situations of Myanmar. For example, there are some states where there are important natural resources that are very important, and in most of the cases at this moment, Tatmadaw, the national army, controls a significant portion of the business. But there's a clash between these two, that who gets the share of the pie at this moment. Is it if there is a loosely, as Professor Imtiaz Ahmed has mentioned, which I totally agree, that if there is a loosely connected negotiated settlement where certain provinces have their own armies and they get control over the economic transactions and trades, that's, I think, is something which is important during the politically negotiated settlement process, if there is any in future. So those two are also very important points that I wanted to say. Now, about the Rohingya issue, I think historically we understand, and now since a lot of literature has been published regarding that and how they were made stateless in several instances since 1990s, how they were forcefully evicted from their countries, their habitat, and they were kind of made refugees forced to cross the border and come to Bangladesh. And in previous instances, I'm talking about before 2017, we understood that there were some negotiations, there were some successes, particularly in regard to the repatriation. One of the very many factors were that Myanmar was also controlled by the military regimes, particularly before 2015, when the new elections took place and Aung San Suu Kyi got elected with vast majority and came to the power. Now, with democracy, I think the problems or the political scenario become very complicated, and there is perhaps a connections, if not like totally a correlation between, because this is also very tricky and difficult to say that the military regime were more successful to take back the refugees. I think this is a wrong analogy, but there might be more complexity onto that. But unfortunately, in pre 2017 cases, we have experienced, more, Rohingyas have repatriated to Myanmar than now. But one has to really look at this situation, the post 2017 situations, not only in between the situations of Bangladesh and Myanmar, but also the regional complexity, the global complexity, the refugee protection mechanism. These three issues are very significant. Like if we now get a number of how many refugees have been repatriated in the post 2001 world structure. So, the refugees who have been uprooted from the northwest frontier province, Balochistan, Afghanistan, and others in this situation, or even the post 2003 Iraq situation. If you think the post Syria situation, so the trend, the global protection mechanism, the geopolitics, all those factors are more prone towards the situations where the refugees stay back in the places where they get shelter. This is very unfortunate, because this basically says that the first option that is mentioned in the refugee convention, that refugees should be repatriated to their homeland, safe and sustainable repatriation, that has not been possible after so many efforts of the international actors, because the political willing to stop the conflict is not particularly working over there. Whether that is in the case of Syria, that's why we still see large number of refugees are residing in Turkey. So in Bangladesh as well, as Bangladesh is more internationally connected at this moment, and Bangladesh is also affected by the conflicts, the regional conflicts and the global conflicts. So we see that since Myanmar is not a stable country since 2017, it could have been possible before 2021 the military coup has been taken place. And if you see that 2021 onwards, when there was a little hope that perhaps the new military junta government would make Myanmar more stable, unfortunately they couldn't do that, because there was a temporary negotiation between the few armed groups and Myanmar government, but it couldn't stay longer, because we saw the Arakan army and the Brotherhood Alliance become more enthusiastic about continuing the fighting between fighting with the Tatmadaw. So ultimately, in this situation, when entire Arakan state and the neighborhood within Myanmar is more volatile, this creates a lot of concern regarding safe and sustainable return of the Rohingya people. This is one definitely a security issue. The second issue is the identity. The identity issue is very significant, because for safe and sustainable return, I think this is very important that Rohingyas should get some sort of assurances that they will be given a citizenship status. Now, if you read the statements of National Unity Government, they started recognizing Rohingya as a terminology, which was not the case when Suki was at the head, as the head of the government in Myanmar, and even when she represented she represented Myanmar in the International Court of Justice. She in the media we have not found that Myanmar officially has ever recognized Rohingya as a citizen or an identity. Now, I think some hopes have been created that if NUG comes to power in future, or some sort of negotiated settlements take place, that Rohingya might have an opportunity to get a legal status as a citizen. This is very important. Without that, there will be possibilities that even if some numbers, some Rohingya peoples are repatriated at one point of time, the root cause of the crisis may not be resolved in that way. So I mean, it's not a very flowery picture or future in waiting for us, particularly when we are talking about the repatriation and of the Rohingyas and the relations in this regard. But I think there are a lot to be done by the international actors in this regard, and if there's some time, I can expand on that. But I should stop at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Niloy, for giving us a very broad idea what is happening with repatriation, with particular focus on Rohingyas. The audience at this point in time, let me welcome General Mahfuz Rahman, retired. He joined us, and we welcome you, sir, to the show. And the audience, you have seen General Mahfuz speaking to us before. He had a long military career. His last appointment was Principal Staff Officer in the Armed Forces Division. He spoke widely in regional military forums internationally as well. And he is an independent scholar and researcher. And most, I would say, interestingly, he has contributed a chapter in our forthcoming book on Rohingya security and media, which will be coming out within a month or so. So, General Mahfouz, welcome to the show, and we deeply appreciate your coming in despite some of the circumstances you are having in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Floor is yours, sir. Go ahead.
What I would like to do would like to talk about the rise of Arakan Army and its security ramification. Then also I'd like to talk about is there a potential of breaking off Myanmar? And then finally I'll touch upon the potential and Rohingya repatriation and what policy options Bangladesh has. So all these three things. I would like to start with a historical thing about Arakan Army and Tatmadaw. If you recall, Tatmadaw history is older than Myanmar or Burma history. In 47, Burma Independent Army was established or founded. And in 48, Burma got independence. So we see how an older institution has a greater power over the latter, even the country. And if we correlate this, we find the Arakan Army founded before ULA, the political entity of Arakan Army. So when the military dominates the political entity, then there are some difficulties. I do not know, but we might say in future that military is dominating the political space in Arakan when it happens or unfolded. And very interestingly, we have seen Major General Naing. He is a very charismatic leader. And leadership in this type of organizations or in this point of time matters a lot. His character or his leadership has overshadowed the political leadership of ULA. So he matters a lot. So that's one thing. And this gentleman is very dynamic as well as very flexible. Why do I say he is dynamic and flexible? When he was founding or leading this particular organization, he went far away from his home location to Kachin and Shan State, took their support and brought out this organization. Gradually, when they got strengthened, then they came back to their home ground in 2016 and then in 2019. And you see, he has already had two ceasefire with Tatmadaw in 2020 and 2022. That means this gentleman is not rigid. And if you recall, in January 22, he said that he is for Rohingyas, accepting Rohingyas in Arakan, and he believes in human rights. And very lately, if you have marked, that he doesn't talk about this any further. So these are something. So he is very malleable with the situation. So we have to remember who we are dealing with in Arakan. And in future, Arakan Army is going to be a player that Bangladesh cannot ignore if Bangladesh wants to repatriate Rohingyas. So this is about the leadership. Now about security ramification in nutshell, I see there are two issues. One is that traditional security issues. The other is non-traditional security issues. Let me talk about the non-traditional security issues first, because I believe more weight is in the non-traditional security space in our southeastern border. Why do I say so? Because you see, Arakan army has about 25,000 strong forces, and you need to have logistic, you need to have pay, pension, medical services, etc. For all these, you need money. And for running this institution, its organization, where the money comes from? The money is coming from drug trade. There is no other business. And toll collection, how much do you collect toll for running a 30,000 strong army? We understand that it's not possible. So this is one. And where there is a drug issue, the other two issues automatically come in is the arms smuggling and human trafficking. And Rohingyas are readily available target group on the table as far as human trafficking is concerned. And about arms smuggling, if we see this tri-border area, junction, there are a number of insurgents group, dissident group of all these three countries. And this is a porous border. So automatically, this is a ground of non-traditional security issues. The other point, we should not forget that when the Taliban is trying to eradicate the poppy cultivation, they have almost done it with 80% of it. But the demand has not been eradicated in the world. The supply is being tamed. So where it is going to come from? From golden crescent to golden triangle. And all the situations are available in golden triangle with Myanmar undergoing this situation. So all these are giving rise to non-traditional security issues, and Bangladesh will be sucked into the vortex. Very sorry I'm saying this, because this is going to happen over time. So these are non-traditional security issues. Now, in addition to that, the dissident group in Bangladesh, if you have been noticing, following various media from Mizoram, you have noticed that some of the dissident group of JSS are now undergoing training. It is the concern of the Mizoram people, Mizoram journalists, and Mizoram government that there are people from Bangladesh side, dissident group from JSS, are undertaking training, about 700 strong there. So all these are the ramification of non-traditional security issues. This is absolutely a volatile area. And why this JSS is taking this chance now? Because of the prevailing condition, incentive going around. As Professor Niloy has already mentioned, this is a kind of conflict economy, war economy. Everybody involved here, they are benefited from loot and pillage, from drug trafficking, arms smuggling, human trafficking, from everything they get benefited. They don't get benefited through winning or losing. As long as conflict survives, the economy survives, the war economy survives, and those who are engaged, they are hugely benefited. Only sufferer are women and children and marginal people, elderly people. So this is a security situation. In traditional security aspect or space, yes, there could be a situation if Myanmar junta can consolidate. And in the process, what happened in 1991 Rejupara incident, that junta forces pushed inside Bangladesh and took over a camp. Myanmar junta or Tatmadaw was always blaming Bangladesh is supporting their dissident group, though Bangladesh has a zero tolerance about this. But if they want to divert the attention or gain popularity or mileage at home, this could be one of the border skirmish that junta could go ahead in future. So this is about the security issues. Now, do we see that Myanmar under this particular condition is breaking up? Geopolitically talking, my understanding, both regional power possibly will not allow this to happen. is against the interest of regional dynamics. For China, China's main artery to the Indian Ocean, their economic corridor and energy corridor, is through Myanmar. The other is Pakistan, but I'm talking about Myanmar. And China wouldn't like his energy security being disturbed. China already knows they are contained in Southeast, South China Sea and East China Sea. And this is the exit. And about 14% of the energy is going through this gas and oil pipeline. And she is not ready to take that risk with her energy security. That is her center of gravity. So any instability in this part of the world is going to seriously affect China's development, which is mainstay of China's legitimacy, of the ruling elite's legitimacy. So this is China wouldn't like that. But what China would like, that Tatmadaw or NUG or the ethnic armed organization should not be singularly so strong that they defy China. So that is one issue. The other issue is that India also does not have any incentive of seeing that Myanmar is breaking apart, because there are two strategic projects of India. The Kaladan project, where she has involved almost $1 billion, and of course, the highway from India, Myanmar, Thailand. This is also look east and act east policy as per that. So India wouldn't like that this country is breaking apart. The other issue is that there are smaller dissident groups of ethnicity, same as across the Indian border in say Mizoram, Nagaland, and Manipur. And Manipur is highly disturbed now. Some of the cookies from across the border from Sagaing are also taking part as per the intelligence sources in Manipur. So breaking apart other side of the border would give incentive to the dissident group inside India. So India wouldn't like that either. So these are some of the things for the regional power. Since they wouldn't like that, so breaking apart for Myanmar, that's going to be very, very difficult. But what we can see, we would be able to see possibly that there will be a federal democracy and a lot of autonomy, that decentralization of power and the smaller groups, ethnic armed organization would be enjoying. So this is my understanding about the second issue. And the third issue, Rohingya repatriation potential. This is a very dicey situation now. And I do not see or very positive about in near future repatriation of the Rohingyas. What is the incentive or motivation for Arakan army to take back the Rohingyas? What is the motivation or bargaining chip that Bangladesh has to motivate Tatmadaw or NUG? I do not see such kind of motivation on their part. But please remember, when Tatmadaw came up hard on Arakan army with four-cut strategy very recently. Four-cut strategy was very successful during General Nevin's time. They applied the same on Arakan against their logistic support, so their food and medicine and their movement. They had been suffering. And ULA had been requesting everyone, was trying to approach everybody around the border. And during their crisis, Bangladesh could not stand beside them, or as per policy, Bangladesh did not stand beside them. So in their bad time, if you are not with them, if their sorrows and if their pain does not touch you during their happiness and enjoyment, they are not going to take you on board also. So we have to remember this. So what is the option for Bangladesh now? My recommendation is that it is understood it is very difficult to support Arakan army for Dhaka or ULA for that matter. But what we can do, being a democracy, we can discuss this, that during the crisis, humanitarian crisis in Arakan, where some Rohingyas are also there, about 400,000. And then what a democracy should do to support the people on other side of the border. We can also discuss in National Committee for Security Affairs that whether Bangladesh could support in this humanitarian crisis or not. This is one recommendation. And the second recommendation is that in addition to that, we can also discuss that if Bangladesh does not support or our foreign policy does not allow it, whether Bangladesh should allow other humanitarian organizations initiative to support Arakanese people using Bangladesh territory. Whether that can be done or not, we can also discuss on that. So these are some of the issues. At the same time, we could also look at whether the Burma Act and of late there will be a Rohingya Act, whether how can we dovetail these two and get best out of this. And only this is the hope that, as far as I'm concerned, that Burma Act has something ingredient where both communities in Rakhines as well as Rohingyas can be benefited through non-lethal and through technical support means. So I think this is how Bangladesh can look at things with the changing situation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. What a wonderful deliberations. And I think the audience, you have now a bit of clear idea about the non-traditional security threats that the general was elaborating quite extensively, and what are the ramifications we are expecting if it doesn't settle quickly. So the audience will move to the Q&A, but I am very mindful about the time. It's almost midnight in Bangladesh, so we'll be very, very brief, but I would like to request three questions that we received from our audience remotely. So I'll start with Professor Imtiaz first. The questions are to you, and then I'll switch to Dr. Niloy and finally General. So the question to Dr. Imtiaz is like this. Sir, we do not see much activities from ASEAN, and particularly in this current situation. Why is it that? And if you also can briefly touch upon China's dual role here, because on the one side we have heard enough about China's center of gravity and etc., and which Tatmadaw is safeguarding as of today. But on the other side, you have said very clearly that China is behind supporting some of the ethnic groups. So why this dubious position of China? And of course, if you can talk about ASEAN, floor is yours, sir, once again.
Thank you. Well, ASEAN, if you take Singapore, for example, they have been doing very good business with Myanmar. Lately, actually, Singapore is the biggest investor, not China. They have crossed China recently. And when it comes to Singapore's investment in Myanmar, keep in mind Singapore is an interesting state where their connection to the West is huge. US investment in Singapore alone is bigger than US investment in India, China, and South Korea together. Given that scenario, Singapore's investment in Myanmar clearly tells you that there is a Western connection in that investment. So I don't think Singapore is interested in making or putting pressure the way they ought to. And in some way, we have seen the division within ASEAN has also helped Myanmar military to remain, wherever they are. I don't think they are interested in the Rohingya issue. They were a little bit interested when Aung San Suu Kyi got displaced, so there were a little bit of movement on that, but that also, I think, passed. So I don't see ASEAN playing an active role. China, on the other hand, don't forget the historical connection between China and Myanmar. There's a border, China's border country. No way China would allow a third country, and that again far away from the region, to get into Myanmar. That is not, and this is a different China. Don't forget, this is not the China of the 70s and the 90s. China is the largest economy in the world, whether you agree or not. It may not have the military strength, but I don't think that is important when it comes to keeping at least the neighboring countries to its side. So China will look at Myanmar very differently from the West, and I believe the very displacement of Aung Suu Kyi clearly tells you that after Aung San Suu Kyi over succeeded in the election, if I can use the word over succeeded, if the success was less, probably Aung San Suu Kyi probably would have continued. But I think Aung San Suu Kyi underestimated the power of Tatmadaw and thought that she could get support from the West, which proved right. But at the end of the day, it is India and China which will decide in a big way. I would say more China, of course, India also, but these two countries will decide the fate of Myanmar, not a third country outside the region. This is clear. There's no way you can have Burma Act, you can have a Rohingya Act, you can have X number of acts. We have seen Afghanistan. It's clear case. Afghanistan is a good example. They had to renegotiate with the Taliban. They wanted to defeat, but at the end of the day, they left their weapons and everything and left, at night, which is quite shocking, which was quite shocking to the Afghans also. So given that example with Taliban, which was not so much organized as the Tatmadaw, Tatmadaw is highly organized, what you call military front, and all the ethnic groups. So what is happening with the dual role? I don't think that is what I say. This is the strategy. Any reading of Sun Tzu or Chanakya will tell you, these strategies would play the same role. The moment within the Myanmar community, NUG was getting support, and PDF, of course, was making grounds. Immediately, China started supporting the ethnic armed groups in a much bigger way. And Three Brotherhood Alliance is a good example where China's hand is very clear. They're still working on the Arakan army also to have a negotiation. Only yesterday, if I'm not wrong, maybe the general can correct me, maybe day before yesterday, I think they had a meeting, the central government and in the Arakan, they got the military people to talk openly and see what kind of negotiation they are. As I said in my presentation, none of these ethnic armed organizations are fighting for an independent state. That has never been the case. They know very well that in the modern structure, they would not be able to sustain a modern state of the kind, particularly when you have India and China, big neighbors. They will also not allow that, because India has its own Northeast problem, where the Nagas have been fighting for independence, for almost 80 years now. So that's not going to happen. So I think the role that they are playing is whoever would come to power, if there is a division within the Tatmadaw, you never know, which might go in favor of NUG, PDF, but they are both from the majority community. They are the Bamar Buddhist hegemony will prevail. And so my point has always been the case that Bangladesh should not get involved in the internal affairs of Myanmar. There's no reason for us to get involved. We will continue working with the central government as as India and China are doing. These are more important actors in the region. We see some Western powers are meddling with NUG and PDF, but I don't think we need to do that. Let them do it. We can have an open mind. We can have a discussion with them. That's not a problem. One or two things I just want to, because General touched one or two things, I thought, let me flag that so that we can have a bigger discussion later on. On the drug issue, please keep in mind, synthetic drugs makes more money than natural drugs. Already UNODC has come up with a report that with the poppy cultivation, it's not going to make much money in Myanmar, because they're already making $4 billion plus with synthetic drug. And yaba, as you know, is one. It's easy to carry, easy to make. You can shift the factories overnight. You can do a lot of things, and it's more profitable. Let's put it that way. Whereas opium is not. One of the reason probably Taliban also found it important to stop the cultivation. They did it earlier also when they were in power, but this time more forcefully. They found the return, maybe not very quickly, but the return from other agriculture crops would be much more profitable. Because as you see, the world has gone for synthetic drugs. The world loves drugs, particularly in the West. Drugs is but they have all gone for synthetic drugs. so we need to see the opium cultivation in a different light than that is being flagged. Very quickly on the incentives that the general was talking about, what would be the incentives of the Arakan Army or Tatmadaw and NUG. This is something that I flagged in a couple of my papers earlier. I think we need to start seriously thinking about the mini Marshall Plan. And that is precisely the reason why I'm interested in re-energizing BCIM. This is a golden opportunity for BCIM to come up. There is already a structure. Now, BCIM has one thing with them, particularly with India and China, if they're together, and that is they don't have shortfalls when it comes to money. With China, if China is there, money is not a problem, particularly in infrastructure development. So I think a mini Marshall Plan can make a difference in that region, much more profitable than synthetic drug. Let's put it that way. If Myanmar can be convinced, it's not only the Arakan Army, all the ethnic armed organizations are somehow linked to the drug, the drug lords and warlords. They go hand in hand, because that's how, and the general is right, that's how they reproduce their power. But the point here is, if Myanmar military, and Myanmar military also is in narco terrorism, they're also in narco business. That is also important to flag. But if a calculation is done, and I'm really looking for a research of that kind, if somebody can sit down to do a research. I was trying to impress upon the Canadian government just a week back here in Bangladesh, whether they could take up a research of that kind, where you calculate how much money you make, from yaba and the drug, which around 4 billion plus. But if there is a mini Marshall Plan of a bigger, kind of a fund, I think the Myanmar military, Arakan Army, NUG, all would be attracted to that, because it would be legal, and it would make life much more different than drug business. So I am hopeful if we can put all these ideas and build something, because whole of Europe, don't forget, Europe had even worse history. When it comes to fighting between countries, look at the kind of genocide that took place. Look at the killing that Europe was involved in just 78 years back. It's not long before, but all got settled because of the Marshall Plan. Marshall Plan really made a difference to Europe. One should not estimate, to the point that France and Germany started working together. Look at whoever thought that France and Germany will work together, will have an embassy or with the same door entrance. Whoever, particularly in Dhaka, we have the Franco-German embassy under the same roof. So I am hopeful, if we can push the idea of a mini Marshall Plan, if we can push the idea of BCIM at this stage, I would be very much hesitant to entertain Burma Act or Rohingya Act, because I don't think they have thought out very clearly. It's always helping logistics, which at the end of the day, it comes to weapons, and then they fly out, because, of course, it helps the military-industrial complex. I see the compulsion why they have to sell weapons. But that is not something that Bangladesh should go into. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I think these are very important questions and suggestions that Professor Imtiaz just suggested. So let's move to Dr. Niloy with a very, I would say, pointed question to you, sir. Given your experience in the area in terms of monitoring radicalization to violence in the camps, what do you think the future of the fallout of the current hostile environment that we see? Because my sources, at least those who are in the camps, they have shared with me that a group of Rohingyas from the camps actually traveled to Rakhine State over the past couple of weeks and participated in some kind of activities with AA and PDF jointly against Tatmadaw, because that is their common enemy, right? So given this, sir, what do you think that we will be in trouble in the future if in case some actions being taken by Tatmadaw and vice versa? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I think this is very crucial, and over the period of time, we have seen, particularly from 2017 onwards, and it's also linked with the demographic changes within the camp. Because when they arrived in 2017, there was a large number of women and very young children, and over the period of time, those very young underage children has obviously become adolescents and on the way to become young people as well. So clearly, the total number among the total number of the Rohingya population, the adolescent youth population is will be a very significant number, and they are usually identified in these literatures as the most significant, ticking bomb. If you utilize them as a human resource, obviously they are the dividend, they are the demographic dividend. But if they were exploited by any of the quarters, they were, they can be identified as or exploited, crucially or critically, which might be in stabilizing factor in the region, particularly in Bangladesh, Myanmar border and borderland areas. Now, when they came here, there were also tensions whether the Rohingyas will be utilized or kind of exploited by the violent extremist groups in the context of violent extremism, when we try to explain violent extremism from the religious-centric extremist groups or so on and so forth. Now, the government of Bangladesh's security agencies have taken enough initiatives to monitor surveillance and also tackle the issues. That's usually the refugee camps are very securitized areas as well, because there are security agencies and intelligence agencies. They work to secure the camp, and also to secure the camp and the host communities, which is very significant. Nevertheless, the scenario has changed over the period of time, because we have seen activities within the camp after the evening, and we have seen the increasing number of violence, particularly the activities of certain groups. There were different names, Ali Akin and others. Initially it was a hush, but later on both Bangladeshi and international media has covered the names, whether they are part of ARSA or not. Although there are narratives of whether the ARSA was also a construction of the Myanmar establishment, and to portray or kind of like justify their violent activities against the Rohingyas in 2016 and 17. So with all those narratives, it's important to take this very seriously, that the young generation of the Rohingya camps are obviously at risks. They might be exploited. They can be taken, inside Myanmar to be part of these joint activities of the Brotherhood alliances, or even the armed fraction of the PDF, and this might have a this might have an impact on obviously Bangladesh Myanmar relations, whatever format that is in, and also in the conflict framework or conflict scenarios in the neighborhood. I mean, there are conflicts in Africa and in other places where one particular group has been instrumental in instigating a conflict in more than one countries. Liberia, Sierra Leone were the classic examples, and there are more examples, or even if you consider the Sahel region as well. These are two different subcontinents, different continents. I'm not kind of like comparing with these two, but there were histories from where refugee camps situated in the borderlands, and there are common groups who are working, and there are potentialities of they are being exploited, and which will definitely have a security ramification or implications in the other neighboring country, which is more stable and peaceful in this context. So if keeping that in mind, I think Bangladesh has to be very careful, particularly regarding and particularly its security agencies, to look after the issues and keep intel informations regarding that, so that this doesn't have a. I totally agree with what Professor Imtiaz Ahmed has said, that we do not have any stake into that in the involvement, but we definitely keep things into mind that we have to keep our own way of surveillance in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Last question to General. Sir, let me be very specific and precise for the sake of time and also for other reasons that both these previous speakers have mentioned. Sir, do you see any potentials of low-intensity conflict in that particular area? And do you think Bangladesh is prepared to deal it militarily? Thank you.
You cannot rule out the situation of low intensity. But before going to that, I would like to make a point about Tatmadaw for my audience. I always say that Tatmadaw is a meritocratic organization. If there is any meritocratic organization in Myanmar that outshines others, it is Tatmadaw. This is number one. And number two is that military under military over time turns into monster, and Tatmadaw is no exception. So consider a meritocratic organization with monstrous outlook. The mix is very dangerous, and that is the ramification we are seeing today. But please don't get away with the idea that Tatmadaw is going to crumble and capitulate, and then there will be a number of states or something like that. Professor has already mentioned about this. That's not going to happen. So Tatmadaw is going to be there. This is the time Tatmadaw is absorbing. It is taking time. It's not hurrying, and will come out with their strength and their experiences. And about Rakhine, I would like to say in Arakan that we might see that Mangdu falling into the hands of Arakan army. It may happen, but certainly Situa not. That's not going to happen. That's a vital ground. And China wouldn't like Situa is falling into the hands of a ethnic armed organization for its energy stability. So this is about our bordering areas, what could happen in the future. And about low intensity conflict, yes, I foresee that there are likely to happen because, as I mentioned in the earlier, the training camp has opened very recently in Mizoram from Bangladesh, and then the porous border. And the other issue is that these three countries in the border, we have common border. India is a democracy. Bangladesh is also a struggling democracy, and Myanmar is a military autocracy. So the political platform for negotiation is absent. So if you want to have a political will, that is not there. number one. And number two is that what is happening, the border regime or the establishment in these three countries, or they are more rigid than the ethnic armed group. The ethnic armed group would collaborate with one another and support for their advantage. But think about Bangladesh military and Myanmar military cooperating across the border and trying to rein in the ethnic armed organization of either side. That's not going to happen. So what is happening at the end? We are trailing behind and blaming one another. And the ethnic armed group on either side are uh, flourishing gradually. So this conflict will prevail until and unless we, three countries over here, we cooperate and we understand for the betterment of every one of us, we need to cooperate. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, so much. The audience ID is past midnight, and I have no intention to hold further our honorable guests from Bangladesh. So here is my take on the today's discussion. The future of Myanmar in the aftermath of this ongoing conflict is uncertain, at the least today that we see. However, with several potential pathways that might occur, and we have seen that our today's panelists have ruled out any federalization of the country itself, and Tatmadaw is going to prevail. But we are unclear today that how this cooperation among these three countries would really expand and unfold in the future. So, dear audience, navigating the intricate situation arising from hosting 1.2 million Rohingyas and forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals, also otherwise known, presents a significant challenge and opportunities for Bangladesh. This situation requires a multifaceted approach that balances humanitarian commitments, security concerns, and international diplomacy. And our speakers today have succinctly put forward some of the ideas, I think, globally, and especially my country, Canada, and global affairs, those who are listening today, might take up seriously. For example, Professor Imtiaz said the idea of BCIM, a distinct platform through which we can talk and think about resolution of the conflict. He also mentioned about mini Marshall Plan, which I like very much, because at the end of the day, most of the problems actually are rooted in the underdevelopment. And if you really recall the Kofi Annan Commission's report during Aung San Suu Kyi's time, particularly in the situation of Rakhine, this has been mentioned repeatedly. And if we go back, Dr. Nilay's comment that the particular age group growing up in the camps, they are really vulnerable, and who knows where they would be eventually ending up in both ways. And Bangladesh, technically and I would say logistically have hardly any resources to monitor all of these, and especially when there is a porous border. The general was very right in saying that he doesn't foresee collapse of Tatmadaw at all. Tatmadaw have endured since 1962 all the major revolutions, what we also know, 1988, 2007, and so on and so forth. So we do see, we would like to see in the future how it actually shapes up the future of Myanmar. So, dear audience, please listen to us in our YouTube channel, our Twitter and Facebook pages. I'm going to share the video and the presentation. It is already there, but in case if you need, let us know. This is a very important discussion, and I understand globally our focus has been shifted too many times, especially in the West. And when Dr. Imtiaz possibly innocently mentioned the West has a they like drugs and sort of thing. And I do totally agree with you, sir. I hope you have not intended any pun. But yes, we have legalized marijuana in a country among other nations. But we do really would like to emphasize that it's a situation that in the West we have not really given adequate attention and importance. When the war in Gaza going on, Ukraine-Russia war, we have totally focused, pumped billions of dollars. Now it is quarter to trillion and military hardware in those areas. And we have not actually been aware what is happening in that part of the area. So with these humble thoughts, dear audience, we'll close the session tonight. On behalf of the Institute, my deepest gratitude to Professor Imtiaz, Dr. Niloy, and General Mahfouz for coming in and talking about the conflict itself. Stay well and stay safe wherever you are. And we'll see and meet each other again, maybe on different occasions. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.